What happens when Tom Holland walks onto a live talk show expecting a light-hearted conversation, and suddenly gets hit with a question that completely stops him in his tracks? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The cameras are already rolling. The familiar energy of The View fills the room. Applause, chatter, that mix of excitement and unpredictability the audience thrives on. The hosts are mid-conversation, wrapping up a previous segment, when the tone shifts just slightly. Whoopi leans forward, smiling in that calm, measured way. All right, we're back, and joining us today is someone you all know, someone you all love. The audience starts clapping louder, already anticipating. The one and only Tom Holland. The applause spikes instantly. Tom walks out, smiling, waving, doing that slightly shy but warm acknowledgement he's known for. He greets the hosts one by one. Quick hug for Whoopi, a friendly nod to Joy, a handshake with Alyssa Farah Griffin, and a cheerful hi to the rest of the panel. He sits down, adjusting slightly in his chair, still smiling as the applause fades. "Thank you for having me," he says, glancing across the table. "This is a bit surreal, I won't lie." Joy laughs. "Oh please, you've been in bigger rooms than this." Tom grins. "Not quite like this, though. This is scarier." The audience laughs. There's an ease in the room. It's the kind of opening that feels natural, relaxed. Whoopi nods. "We don't bite." Not immediately. More laughter. Tom relaxes a bit more, leaning back. They start where you'd expect: his recent projects, his schedule, how he balances fame. The questions are light, familiar. "So you've been incredibly busy," Alyssa says, smiling politely. "New projects, traveling constantly. How do you stay grounded through all of that?" Tom nods thoughtfully. "Honestly? Family. Friends. I try to keep my circle really tight. It's easy to get lost in everything, so I just go back to what feels normal." Sunny leans in. "And does it ever feel overwhelming? The attention, the expectations." Tom exhales softly. "Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But it's also a privilege, you know? I try to remind myself of that." The audience murmurs in agreement. It's going smoothly. Comfortable. Predictable. Joy jumps in. And the fans, because they are intense. Tom laughs. "They are passionate." "Passionate?" Joy raises an eyebrow. "That's a polite way of saying it." The audience laughs again. Tom shrugs playfully. "I've learned to appreciate it." Everything feels like a typical segment, until the tone shifts, just slightly. Alyssa, who's been listening carefully, tilts her head. There's a pause, brief but noticeable. She glances at her notes, then back at Tom. "So Tom," she begins, her tone still polite but more direct now, "you've talked a lot about staying grounded and keeping your circle tight. But I think a lot of people are curious about something a bit deeper." Tom's smile softens, but he stays attentive. "Okay." There's a subtle shift in the audience. Less laughter now, more anticipation. Alyssa continues. "You've grown up in the spotlight. And with that comes not just attention, but influence. Whether you want it or not." Tom nods slowly. "Sure. And with that influence," she adds, leaning in slightly, "there's also responsibility. Especially when it comes to what you choose to speak on, and what you don't." The table gets quieter. Joy glances sideways, sensing the shift. Whoopi watches closely, expression neutral. Tom's posture changes just a little. He's still calm, but more focused now. "Right." Alyssa pauses, just enough to let the weight of her words settle. "So my question is," she says, her voice steady, "do you think you've done enough with your platform? Or have you been playing it safe?" The audience reacts instantly, some gasps, some murmurs. A few scattered claps, but mostly that unmistakable, "oh," sound that ripples through the room when something unexpected lands. Tom blinks. Just once. But it's enough to show he wasn't expecting that. There's a brief silence. Not long, but long enough for everyone to feel it. Joy shifts in her seat. "Oh, we're going there." Whoopi raises a hand slightly, not stopping it, but acknowledging it. Tom lets out a small breath, looking down for a second before looking back up at Alyssa. He starts, then pauses again. "That's a big question." Alyssa nods. "It is." Sunny leans forward, curious. "Take your time." Tom gives a small, appreciative nod. I think it depends on what you mean by enough, you know?" Alyssa doesn't interrupt. She lets him continue. "I've always tried to be careful," Tom says. "Not in a way where I'm avoiding things, but in a way where I don't speak on something unless I really understand it." A few audience members nod. "But at the same time," he continues, "I get what you're saying. There's definitely a pressure to use your voice more. And I think about that a lot. Alyssa watches him closely. But do you think thinking about it is the same as acting on it? Another ripple through the audience. Tom's expression tightens, just slightly. Not defensive, but more serious now. I don't think it's that simple, he says. Joy jumps in quickly, sensing the tension building. I mean, not everyone has to be an activist, right? Alyssa turns slightly toward Joy. I'm not saying they do. But when you have millions of people listening, staying silent can also send a message. Sunny nods. That's true. Whoopi finally steps in, her tone calm but firm. All right, let's not talk over each other. The room settles again. Tom leans forward now, more engaged than before. Can I just say something? Whoopi gestures. Go ahead. Tom looks directly at Alyssa. I understand the question. I really do. And I don't think it's unfair. But I also think there's this assumption that if you're not constantly speaking out, you're not doing anything. The audience quiets, listening closely. And that's not always true, he adds. Alyssa nods slowly. So what are you doing then? That's the moment. It lands sharper than before, not aggressive but pointed. Tom pauses again. This time longer. You can feel it, the shift from a casual interview to something much more real. The audience is completely silent now. Tom inhales, glancing briefly at the table, then back up. Well, he says, his voice quieter but steady, that's not always something I feel comfortable broadcasting. And just like that, the tension thickens. Joy leans back slightly, eyebrows raised. Sunny watches intently. Whoopi's expression stays measured. Alyssa doesn't back off. Not yet. But if people don't see it, she says carefully, how do they know it's happening? Tom looks at her, really looks this time. And for the first time since he sat down, the smile is completely gone. The audience holds its breath. Because now this isn't just an interview anymore. It's a conversation that's about to go somewhere neither side can easily walk back from. Tom keeps his gaze on Alyssa Farah Griffin for a moment longer, then shifts slightly in his chair, exhaling as if he's choosing his words very carefully. I think, he starts, then pauses again, almost catching himself mid-thought. I think there's this expectation now that everything meaningful has to be visible. And I don't necessarily agree with that. A few audience members murmur, some in agreement, others unsure. Alyssa tilts her head. But visibility is part of influence, right? Especially for someone in your position. Tom nods slowly. It can be, yeah. But it can also become performative. And that's something I've always been really cautious about. Joy leans in immediately. There you go. That's a good point. Sunny raises a hand slightly. But hold on. There's a difference between being performative and being accountable. Tom turns towards Sunny, acknowledging her point. I agree. Completely. But I also think people assume that if you're not posting something or speaking publicly about it, then you're not involved. And that's just not accurate. Alyssa doesn't break eye contact. So is it about privacy? Or is it about avoiding backlash? The audience reacts again, this time louder. A few gasps, a couple of "oh wow" whispers ripple across the room. Tom's eyebrows lift slightly. Avoiding backlash? Alyssa nods, calm but direct. Yeah, because let's be honest, when celebrities speak out, there's always a reaction. Sometimes it's supportive, sometimes it's not. So I'm asking, is part of the hesitation about not wanting to deal with that? There's a brief pause. Tom leans back, pressing his lips together for a second. Then he lets out a small, almost incredulous laugh, not mocking, but surprised. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it, he admits. That honesty catches the room off guard. The audience quiets again, listening closely. But I don't think that's the main reason, he continues. I think the bigger issue is, when you have a platform like mine, anything you say can be taken out of context, twisted, or misunderstood. And that can actually do more harm than good. Whoopi nods slightly. That's true. Alyssa folds her hands on the table. But isn't that the risk anyone takes when they speak publicly? Politicians, journalists, activists, they all deal with that. Tom nods. Absolutely. And I respect that. I really do. But they're also trained for it. That's their world. Mine isn't. Joy jumps in, pointing lightly toward him. Exactly. He's an actor. That's his job. Sunny shakes her head slightly. But being an actor doesn't mean you're exempt from responsibility. Tom turns to her again, calm but clearly more engaged now. I'm not saying I'm exempt. I'm just saying, I don't think the expectation should be that every actor becomes a spokesperson for every issue. The audience reacts, some clapping, some staying quiet. Alyssa leans forward again, her tone still controlled but more persistent now. No one's asking you to speak on everything. But there are moments, big moments, where people look to voices like yours. And when you choose not to say anything, it can feel like indifference. That word lands heavily. Tom's expression shifts again, not defensive, but more serious than before. Indifference, he repeats quietly. Alyssa nods. That's how some people interpret it. Tom takes a breath, looking down briefly, then back up. I think that's a dangerous assumption. The room goes still again. Because it suggests that the only way to care is to be loud about it, he continues. And that's just not true. Sunny crosses her arms slightly. But silence can also be loud. There's a ripple of agreement from parts of the audience. Tom nods slowly. I get that. I really do. But I also think there's a difference between silence and choosing your moments. Joy gestures with her hand. Not everything needs a press release, folks. Alyssa glances at Joy, then back at Tom. So how do you decide which moments matter? That question hangs in the air. Tom pauses again, longer this time. You can see him thinking, weighing his answer. It's not a perfect system, he finally says. It's instinct, mostly. And conversations I have with people I trust. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't. Whoopi nods. That's honest. But I'd rather take the time to understand something properly, Tom adds, than rush to say something just because people expect me to. Alyssa doesn't immediately respond. She studies him for a second, then speaks again. But do you think there's a risk in waiting too long? That by the time you speak, the moment has passed? Tom leans forward again, his tone more firm now. Yeah, there's a risk. There's always a risk. But there's also a risk in speaking too soon and getting it wrong. The audience claps lightly at that. Sunny nods reluctantly. That's fair. For a brief moment, it feels like the tension might ease, but Alyssa isn't quite done. Can I ask you something more specific? She says. Tom hesitates for just a fraction of a second, then nods. Sure. Alyssa takes a breath. There have been several major global issues over the past few years where a lot of your peers have spoken out, very directly, very publicly. And you've been quieter. The audience leans in again. Do you think that's something you'll change moving forward? She asks. Or is that a conscious choice you're sticking with? Tom shifts in his seat again, his hands coming together in front of him. I think, he begins, then stops. He looks out toward the audience for a moment, then back at the table. I think I'm still figuring that out, he says honestly. That answer surprises people. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's real. I'm 27, he adds with a small shrug. I didn't grow up thinking I'd be in a position where people would analyze everything I say, or don't say. A few audience members nod, some even laugh softly at the relatability. I'm learning as I go, he continues. And I'm trying to do it in a way that feels genuine, not forced. Alyssa softens slightly, but her tone remains serious. And what does genuine look like to you? Tom meets her gaze again. It looks like being honest about what I know and what I don't. It looks like not pretending to have all the answers. And it looks like doing things that matter, even if they're not always visible. There's a small wave of applause. Joy smiles. I like that answer. Sunny nods, though still thoughtful. It's a complicated balance. Whoopi leans back, finally stepping in to shift the tone slightly. Well, that's the thing. This isn't simple. And I think people forget that sometimes. The audience claps more confidently now, appreciating the moment of grounding. But even as Whoopi speaks, you can feel it. The conversation hasn't fully settled. Alyssa gives a small nod, but her expression suggests she's still thinking, still weighing something. And Tom, he's no longer the relaxed guest who walked out at the start. He's fully in it now, engaged, serious, aware that this isn't just another light interview. It's something else entirely. And as the cameras stay locked on the table, the energy in the room shifts again, because it's clear this conversation isn't over yet. The brief pause that follows feels heavier than anything that's been said so far. It's not silence in the usual sense. It's the kind where everyone knows the conversation has crossed into something more personal, more layered, and there's no easy way to steer it back. Tom Holland shifts slightly, clasping his hands together, then releasing them again. He glances toward Whoopi as if expecting her to move things along, but she doesn't. Not yet. Instead, she watches, letting the moment breathe. Alyssa leans back just a fraction, then forward again, like she's deciding whether to continue pushing. She does. I want to be clear. Alyssa Farah Griffin says, her tone still measured. This isn't about putting you on the spot for the sake of it. I think people are genuinely trying to understand where you stand. Tom nods, but there's a faint tension in his jaw now. I get that, but I also think, Alyssa continues, when you say you're still figuring it out, some people hear that and think, well, how long does that take? A low murmur spreads through the audience again. Tom exhales through his nose, a small, controlled breath. That's fair, he says. But I also think people underestimate how complicated it is when your words reach millions of people instantly. Sunny leans forward, resting her forearms on the table. But that's exactly why it matters, right? Because it reaches millions. Tom nods. Exactly. Which is why I don't take it lightly. Joy jumps in, her tone slightly sharper now. But there's a difference between not taking it lightly and not taking a stand. That lands harder than expected. Even the audience reacts with a sharper, oh, this time. Tom turns to Joy, his expression tightening just a little. I do take a stand. Joy raises her eyebrows. Publicly, there's a beat. Tom pauses again, but this time he doesn't look down. He keeps his eyes up, steady. Sometimes, he says. Joy leans back. That's not very reassuring. Whoopi finally lifts her hand, stepping in. All right, let's not corner him. But the energy doesn't diffuse, it just shifts direction. Tom speaks again before anyone else can jump in. Can I just clarify something? Whoopi nods. Go ahead. Tom leans forward now, more grounded, more certain. I think there's this narrative that if you're not constantly posting statements or making speeches, you're somehow disengaged. And I don't think that's fair. Sunny tilts her head. But that's the reality of how people interpret it. Tom nods. I understand that. But I don't think the solution is to force everyone into the same mold. Alyssa watches him closely, her expression more analytical now than confrontational. So what does your version of engagement look like? Tom hesitates, but only briefly this time. It looks like conversations that aren't public, he says. It looks like supporting organizations quietly. It looks like learning, actually taking the time to understand issues before speaking on them. Alyssa responds almost immediately. But why keep that quiet? Tom's eyebrows lift slightly, like the answer is obvious to him. Because not everything needs to be announced. A few people in the audience clap at that. Others stay quiet. Sunny shakes her head slightly. But transparency matters too. Especially when people look up to you. Tom nods, acknowledging the point. I get that. I really do. But I also think there's a line between transparency and turning everything into content. That phrase gets a stronger reaction. Some claps, some murmurs of agreement. Joy points at him. That's the social media world now, though. Everything is content. Tom gives a small, almost resigned smile. Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem. There's a brief pause, and for a moment, it feels like the conversation might plateau. But Alyssa isn't finished yet. She leans in again, her voice quieter this time, but sharper. Do you think there's ever been a moment, she asks, where you look back and think, I should have said something? That question lands differently. It's not accusatory, it's reflective. And it catches Tom off guard in a way the earlier questions didn't. He doesn't answer right away. Instead, he looks down at his hands, rubbing his thumb against his fingers, thinking. The audience is completely silent now. Even Joy doesn't interrupt. After a few seconds, Tom nods once. Yeah, he says quietly. There have been moments like that. The honesty shifts the tone again. Alyssa softens slightly. Can you talk about that? Tom hesitates. Not specifically, he says. But yeah, there have been times where I've thought, maybe I could have handled that differently. Sunny leans in, her voice gentler now. What stopped you in those moments? Tom takes a breath. Fear, probably. That answer hits. Not dramatically, but deeply. Fear of getting it wrong, he adds. Fear of saying something that might hurt more than help. And yeah, fear of the backlash too. The audience murmurs again, this time more empathetic. Joy looks at him more closely now, her tone less confrontational. But isn't that something everyone deals with? Tom nods. Of course. But not everyone deals with it on this scale. Whoopi finally speaks again, her voice calm but grounded. That's the part people don't always think about. The scale. Alyssa nods slowly. That's true. But at the same time, that scale is also why it matters. Tom meets her gaze again. I know. There's a pause, longer this time, but not tense. Just reflective. Then Tom continues, almost more to the room than to any one person. I don't want to be someone who speaks just to avoid criticism, he says. And I don't want to be someone who stays silent out of fear either. I'm trying to find a balance between those two things. Sunny nods. That's a fair goal. Joy adds, it's just not an easy one. Tom lets out a small laugh. No, it's not. Alyssa studies him for a moment, then asks one more question, quieter, but still pointed. So what would it take, she says, for you to feel ready to speak more openly? Tom doesn't hesitate this time. Understanding, he says. Confidence that I'm not adding noise, but actually contributing something meaningful. Alyssa tilts her head. And do you think you're close to that? Tom pauses, then gives a small, honest shrug. I think I'm getting there. The audience responds with a soft wave of applause. Not loud, but supportive. Whoopi nods, finally stepping in to guide the moment. All right, that's real. And I think people can respect that. But even as she says it, you can feel it. The conversation has left a mark. This isn't just another segment anymore. It's something people are going to talk about. Tom leans back slightly, exhaling as if he's been holding tension in his shoulders. Joy glances at Alyssa, then back at Tom. You handled that well. Tom smiles faintly. I tried. Sunny adds, and you answered honestly. That counts. Tom nods. That's all I can do. Whoopi looks out toward the audience. And that's all anyone can do. The audience applauds again, stronger this time. But even as the clapping fills the room, there's a sense that something unresolved still lingers. Because while the tone has softened, the questions haven't fully gone away. And neither has the impact of what was just said. The applause lingers a little longer than usual, like the audience itself is trying to process what just unfolded. It's not the loud, cheerful kind from the beginning. It's more measured, more thoughtful. Tom Holland leans back in his chair, rolling his shoulders slightly, as if releasing tension he didn't even realize he was holding. There's a small smile on his face again, but it's different now. Less performative, more reflective. Whoopi looks across the table, then out toward the audience. Well, she says, her voice steady. That's what real conversations look like. A few people clap again, nodding. Joy exhales, shaking her head slightly with a half smile. I'll say this. This was not the segment I thought we were having. The audience laughs lightly, easing some of the remaining tension. Sunny glances at Tom. But it's probably one people will remember. Tom nods. Yeah, I think so too. Alyssa Farah Griffin sits back now, her posture less forward than before. She looks at Tom for a moment, then speaks again, this time with a noticeably softer tone. I do appreciate you answering honestly, she says. I know it's not easy, especially in a setting like this. Tom meets her gaze and gives a small nod. I appreciate the question, even if it caught me off guard. The audience reacts with a few knowing laughs. Alyssa smiles slightly. That wasn't entirely accidental. Joy jumps in immediately, pointing at her. Oh, we know. More laughter breaks out. Whoopi raises a hand, smiling. All right. No ambush accusations on live TV. Tom chuckles, the tension easing just a bit more. But the weight of the conversation still lingers, and Sunny brings it back gently. I think what's interesting here, she says, is that this isn't just about you. It's about a bigger conversation people are having, about celebrities, influence, responsibility, all of it. Tom nods slowly. Yeah, I agree. And I think, Sunny continues, people watching at home are probably split right now. Some are saying, he's right, not everything needs to be public. And others are saying, no, with that kind of platform, you have to be more vocal. The audience murmurs in agreement, clearly recognizing both sides. Tom looks out briefly toward the crowd, then back at the table. And I understand both perspectives. I really do. Whoopi leans forward slightly. And that's the reality. There isn't one answer that satisfies everyone. Joy adds, if there was, we'd all be out of a job. The audience laughs again. For a moment, the show finds its rhythm again, lighter, more familiar, but it's still grounded in what just happened. Whoopi turns to Tom. Before we wrap, is there anything you want people to take away from this? From what you said today? Tom pauses, not out of uncertainty this time, but intention. Yeah, he says. I think I'd want people to understand that I care, even if it doesn't always look the way they expect. The audience quiets again, listening closely. And I'm trying, he adds. I'm learning. I'm listening. And I'm open to doing better. There's a wave of applause, stronger now, more unified. Sunny nods. That's all anyone can ask for. Alyssa gives a small, respectful nod as well. That's fair. Whoopi smiles. All right, that's a good note to land on. The segment begins to wrap, cameras pulling slightly wider, the music cue faintly starting underneath the conversation. Tom Holland, everyone, Whoopi says, gesturing toward him. The audience applauds loudly again as Tom waves, standing up briefly to acknowledge them. But even as the show moves on, you can feel it. This wasn't just another interview. It was one of those moments that sticks. Off camera, the energy shifts immediately. Tom steps away from the table, exhaling more deeply now, running a hand through his hair. One of the producers approaches him, speaking quietly. He nods, still processing. Alyssa stands as well, walking a few steps toward him. "Hey," she says, her tone calm. "No hard feelings?" Tom looks at her, then smiles faintly. "No. It was intense but good." She nods. That was the goal. Joy passes by them, muttering with a grin. "Next time, warn the guy." They all laugh, briefly but genuinely. Whoopi joins them a moment later, placing a hand lightly on Tom's shoulder. "You handled yourself well," she says. "Not everyone does in that situation." Tom nods. "I appreciate that." The crew starts resetting the stage for the next segment, but the conversation from just minutes ago is still echoing, not just on set, but far beyond it. Within minutes of the segment airing, clips begin circulating online. Short videos of the exchange, especially that moment when Tom pauses after Alyssa's question, start gaining traction. Captions appear almost instantly. Tom Holland caught OFF guard on live TV. Did he dodge the question, or answer it honestly? Fans divided after tense moment on The View. On platforms like Twitter and YouTube, the reactions come fast, and they're split. Some users praise Tom. He stayed calm and honest. Respect. Not every celebrity needs to perform activism online. That was one of the most real answers I've seen on TV. Others are more critical. He admitted he stays quiet because of fear. That says a lot. With that platform, figuring it out isn't enough. Alyssa asked the right question. Someone had to. Clips of the View segment start trending, with debate threads growing by the minute. Even media outlets begin picking it up, analyzing the exchange, breaking down each response, each pause, each reaction from the hosts. Backstage, Tom is shown a few of the early reactions. He scrolls for a moment, then hands the phone back with a small shake of his head. "Yeah, that's about what I expected," he says. There's no frustration in his voice, just acceptance. By the time the episode fully airs across time zones, the moment has already become one of the most talked about segments of the week. Not because of shouting, not because of chaos, but because it felt real. A real question, a real reaction, a real conversation that didn't have a perfect answer. And that's what people keep coming back to. Back on set, as the show closes, Whoopi looks into the camera one last time. "You never know where a conversation's going to go," she says. But that's why we have them. The audience applauds again, the lights dim slightly, and the credits begin to roll. And for everyone watching, whether they agreed with Tom, with Alyssa, or somewhere in between, it leaves a question hanging. What does responsibility really look like when the whole world is listening? If you watched this moment, share your opinion in the comments. Do you think Tom Holland handled the situation the right way, or should he have been more direct? And don't forget to subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories, moments, and debates like this.